Krishna Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dhanyavad Pranam devotees. Well, hopefully everybody had a very wonderful Ram Navami. It's been very nice hearing so many different katha over the course of the last week or so. So very nice to be absorbed in hearing about the glories of various incarnations of the Lord. And this is our methodology for creating a shift in consciousness, because the material energy has a way of absorbing the consciousness of the jiva. That's the very nature of the relationship between the jiva and material energy. And the process of bhakti is reversing that absorption and taking it out of the material energy and putting it into the spiritual energy, which comes in the form of harikatha, sadhu sangha, all of the different kinds of seva done to Hari Guru and Vaishnav. So that's the methodology for shifting absorption. So it brings us to a topic that I received a question on. This is an older question. Like I said, I'm doing a little bit of catch up now because I've been a little bit busy over the last couple of weeks. So it was a devotee family, and they wrote about how to understand male-female relationships, essentially sexual energy, in Krishna consciousness. And they brought up several different questions, and I didn't bring my notes here that had or the message actually that had all the various questions, but I'm summarizing. They asked one about what is the true meaning of illicit sex, because they've heard different things, inclusive of sex is only for the procreation of children, sex is only within marriage, illicit sex is any sex outside of marriage. So in this way, they had heard various nuanced descriptions of what is described as illicit sex. Maybe let me deal with one thing at a time so I don't get off track. So just to answer that particular question, and maybe leading into a deeper understanding of how to understand sexual energy, period, is that it's explained in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 3rd canto, Kamana Daivananda Traina, Janto Dehopapatye, Shri Uttara Praveshta Pumsam Reta Karanasaya. The process by which the karma of various jivas within the material cycle of samsara, how it is carried out is that from one life to another, their combination of desires and their own reactions to previous life's activities culminate in the transmission of a male semen going into the womb of a woman and producing a package, a karmic package that is in exact accord with the destiny, karmana daivanana trena, exactly accorded with the destiny of that jiva, right? So here I'm quoting this verse because this describes the purpose for which the sexual energy has appeared in the jiva. The sexual energy, we sometimes say, is a perverted reflection of love of God, right? So you can say like that. It can be said in one sense, but it has to really be situated contextually so that it's clear. So the sexual energy is actually an energy of Bhagavan, and that energy is given in the jiva in relation to seva in the Srishti Leela of Bhagavan. In other words, Bhagavan performs pastimes within the material world among various jivas who are unfolding through various karmic portfolios, one life after another. The process by which, as I just described, those jivas come from life to life is under the auspices of the sexual energy, which is given to the jivas to make that happen. So truly, the sexual energy is a seva to Bhagavan. So our Srila Prabhupada, as well as all of our acharyas, have said, whenever that energy is used outside of the seva to Bhagavan, which is to create the facility for Atmas to come into the material world in their different karmic iterations to continue their unfoldment, and hopefully Brahmanya Brahmati Kon Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Poi Bhakti Lata Beach in some life have the great fortune to meet sadhu and take to the path of bhakti. So that's the actual purpose of that energy, which is bestowed upon the jiva in relation to the seva of Bhagavan. So our acharyas have said anything outside of that seva is considered to be illicit use of the sexual energy. So, of course, obviously, in dharmic framework, in order to carry out that seva, there should be marriage. Therefore, sometimes you hear that illicit sex is sex outside of marriage. But here it was not a subset, so to speak, of, well, you can either be for the procreation of children or just within marriage. So I'm not speaking here to the nature of the unfoldment of individuals, because that's a whole different consideration. I'm speaking to what is the standard that was understood by the words and by Sastra as it was explained by our acharyas. So I'm not making a statement regarding how different persons, especially in the practice of bhakti, are going through different stages of unfoldment. Because everybody, according to their karma, according to their previous impressions in bhakti, so forth and so on, they have different kinds of unfoldment. And therefore there may be different stages that they will go through in trying to unfold to bhakti in general. In other words, trying to come to the stage of first nishta, then ruchi, because the objective, according to Sastras, kriti sajya bhavet sajya bhavasa sadanabhida nitya sirasa bhavasha prakritam riddhi sajjata. The sajja, or the goal of practicing bhakti, is to obtain bhav. But we also have micro goals in relation to that. So the first sort of goal is to obtain the stage of nishta, that we want our practice in bhakti to become steady. Once the practice of bhakti is steady, it provides a platform by which the inherent taste in bhakti, called ruchi, can appear on the chitta. So that's the first micro goal, to obtain steadiness in bhakti. And of course, there are several other, I don't want to say, well, maybe we should use those as micro goals. Just the attainment of true faith in sadhu sangha, and then starting to practice under the anugatya, or following of sadhus, and then by that practice, the removal of anarthas, and then nishta will come. So in this way, we can look in micro goals. And in the course of doing those micro goals in unfolding in bhakti, the different karmic impressions in the chitta of each individual jiva will manifest. And therefore, somebody will immediately be able to take to brahmachari life and just go on from there with not too much disturbance of sensual energy. Some persons may have more disturbance of sensual energy and, of course, get married, and then they'll have to figure out how to regulate their dealings and so forth and so on, knowing what the standard is, which I already described. The standard is the seva to the Srishti Lila of Bhagavan. So this is what is meant by sex is only for procreation. And it's not just for procreation, actually. It is the facility of Atmas coming into the world to pursue the opportunity to take to the path of bhakti. That's a seva to the Srishti Lila of Bhagavan. You understand? That's a different thing. So just like I want to have children, also, obviously, that is there. But remember that pure bhakti is based in anya abhilasita sunya, being void of any other desire except the anukul seva to Sri Krishna. Therefore, the desire to have children for the purpose of serving Krishna, that is a legitimate desire in accordance with pure bhakti. You understand? So, but of course, again, there's two different levels of conversation. One is what is the ideal, and one is what is the actual individual unfoldment according to someone's karma and according to someone's impressions of bhakti from a previous life. Because everyone's bhakti is functioning praktanaka adunki chasti yatsat bhakti vasana, according to previous and current impressions in bhakti. Haribol, devotees, Sadhana Siddha Prabhu, Prashant Prabhu, Shakada Dasi. So according to different devotees' previous and current impressions, their bhakti is unfolding. And that's a very individual thing. It says your bhakti DNA, so to speak. It is individual as DNA in a person. So no two people have the exact same status or accord in terms of their ability to digest the practice and so forth and so on. But there has to be an ideal. And the ideal is mentioned by our acharyas. That the ideal is the seva to the Srishti Lila Bhagavan. This is the highest quality of the manifestation of dealing with the sexual energy in relation to bhakti. Sort of nuance of that is obviously that couldn't happen if you're not in the dharmic role of husband and wife, which means marriage, right? And then beyond that is within husband and wife, the unfoldment of their different impressions, as I just talked about, and their ability or inability to just jump to the standard, and therefore the need to build to that platform. So just to be clear, we went through what is the actual standard that our acharyas have talked about and Sastra talks about as what is illicit or proper dharmic connections as far as sexual energy is concerned. Krishna himself is told in Bhagavad Gita, Dhamma virudatma kamoshmi bhatta shabha. He told to Arjuna, listen, I am that sex life which is devoid of being Dhamma virud, means opposite of Dharma, right? It's translated as being void of passion and so forth, so on. So that means being devoid of one's own self-interest, right? But of course, from so many previous impressions in previous lives, we develop everything around our own self-interest. And in the material world, sexual energy is the most prominent thing, and therefore our self-interest around sexual energy becomes very prominent. And it's reinforced over and over again, especially in the Kali Yuga. You'll see that sexual energy is everywhere, because it is also the greatest imitation within the material world. It's the greatest imitation of the nature of the love of Radha and Krishna. You understand? So the nature of the envy grown from self-interest produces a desire to imitate that position. Now, devotees, we consciously can't even fathom it because oh, no, I don't want to do that. I would never want to do that. But you have to think, for the majority of the world, their perspective on sex life is it is completely something based in self-interest, and there's not even knowledge of a God and a God's own feminine counterpart and a divine loving Leela and all these things. It's not even in their purview. So everything about the sexual energy for the bulk of people in the world is around self-interest. You understand? So of course in devotional life that has to be adjusted. And the view has to be that unless I'm in the frame of doing that seva, right, that I talked about earlier, in creating the ability for souls to come in this world with the opportunity to take to the path of bhakti, especially by the fact that the parents who made the arrangement under the influence of obviously Krishna's giving energy to the jiva, right, made that arrangement, and their devotees, they have the opportunity now to give those souls opportunities, because being born in a devotee family is not, a usual thing. It means that you have previous sanskars, bhakti sanskars, that allowed you to be born into the family of devotees. So especially for devotees, their sexual energy is very much in line with service to Bhagavan. So when they are thinking to have a child, then that is definitely a service, because if they themselves are devotees, it's opening the portal for those souls whose bhakti samskars are mature enough for them to take birth in a devotee family. So it's a very important service, actually. And in the Grihastha ashram, maybe no more important service. At the same time, there was some other part of the question that the couple wrote regarding having children and then dealing with the financial realities of how many children can you have. So though, like I'm expressing, having children for the service of Bhagavan is a integral part of the Grihastha ashram, there are also, material realities. How many children can you afford? So, of course, we're living in a social dynamic that does not come from a spiritual paradigm or spiritual point of view, right? It's also just like there's individual self-interest, there's huge collective societal self-interest. And in the self-interest of society, you even see in some countries, you can only have one child. Or they encourage people not to have children. They're not encouraging people not to have sex, they're encouraging people not to have children, right? So they're actually promoting adharma, right? So have sex but don't have children. And therefore, this leads to a myriad of different kinds of exploitation of the sexual energy which is given by Bhagavan for that seva. It ends up being innumerable varieties of aparad to that energy. You understand? So the idea is that at the same time, we have to be pragmatic, because if you can only afford to have a certain amount of children, then you have to say that that is the nature of the service that you can do based on the environment and the world we live in, right? In former times, obviously, there was the true idea that, like there's a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And there was an idea that if people had many children, they were part of a community, and that community or that village was the parental atmosphere socially for all the children. And that there was a sense of community to help each other and so forth and so on. Practically speaking, nowadays, in the Kali Yuga especially, and also in the social dynamics that most people live in, especially in the Western world, those things don't exist. So therefore, there has to be some idea that even if I'm doing this in the proper manner in regard to utilizing the sexual energy to have children, to give them an opportunity to practice bhakti, then I have to still function according to practically how I can render that service. Just like I'll give the idea, everyone may have a deep desire to build an amazing community for devotion with a nice temple and facilities and so forth and so on. But practically speaking, your economic reality will dictate what you can and cannot do in that regard. Now, as far as Krishna is concerned, he is Bhavagrahi Janardhan. So Krishna is accepting that sentiment that I want to serve in such a high-class way and do so many sevas. You understand? But it's not necessary or not sometimes a reality that you can carry out seva in that regard. In the same way, in regard to having children for the sake of allowing souls to have an opportunity for Krishna consciousness, that consideration of what you can practically do economically has to be there. Now, then the question arises, well, what happens after that? If I can only afford 2 children, does that mean my connections between husband and wife are limited to those 2 events? By ideal standard, yes. By ideal standard, yes, because what you're pursuing is love of God, and in pursuance of love of God, anya abhilasita sunya. There is a deference of your self-interest to the interest of Bhagavan. That is the nature of bhakti. That's what it means, pure bhakti. That's what it means. Now, the question is, well, that's really difficult, because especially if we're coming from a social dynamic and a social background and even a karmic background where the potency or strength of the sexual energy in any given person's karmic portfolio may be very strong, how do you deal with that? So it's not like Krishna left out those souls and said, well, I don't have any plan for you. Krishna is told, Raso Vrajam Rasupyasya Param Drishvanavartate. Believe it or not, there is something that has a ability to give taste to your Atma that would then make the inferiority of self-interest in so many ways, but even especially here in the sexual energy we're talking about, would make that insignificant. So Krishna's not abandoned the jiva in the sense that, well, just going to leave everybody frustrated and repressed and so forth and so on. He's saying, Raso rajam, raso piyasya param drishvanavartate. If that lower taste is being given up in deference to a superior taste, this is the real practice of bhakti. So it is not like bhakti is void of taste, except the taste comes in connection, just like in the material world, the taste we're deriving, even from a sexual energy, is in relation to another jiva. So Krishna is saying, listen, there is also a taste inherent in the relation between the jiva and Bhagavan. We shouldn't think, oh, well, the relation with Krishna is void of any kind of taste. It's just duty. I have to do this, but it doesn't have any real taste in it. That's not a fact. Therefore, Krishna comes and displays unlimited leelas, which are fully imbued with what is called rasa. Rasa is a taste. Vyatiti bhavana vatma yas chamatkara bharabahu. Chamatkar means it's an astounding, astonishing taste. So the relationship between the jiva and Bhagavan, and the relationship between the jiva and Bhagavan, and then Bhagavan's performance of so many leelas, is to give the jiva a superior param drisva, a superior taste based on that relation. Now, where we are clawing and scratching to get to that taste, that will also be bhakti. My Guru Padapadma said, to try is bhakti, but that trying has to be in earnest. So if someone is dealing with trying to negotiate the influence of sexual energy in their life, and they are pushing forward to reach this point of param drisra, the superior taste, then Krishna acknowledges that. Guru Parampara acknowledges that and gives Shakti through Harinam, Harikatha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhagavat Seva, etc. to that jiva to allow them to take the incremental steps to come to the point of experiencing the superior taste, which automatically makes that taste that was of a lower caliber of self-interest more insignificant, until it becomes completely insignificant in the face of the pure practice of bhakti. There comes a time when the taste derived from all of the elements of the practice of pure bhakti, saturating the senses, becomes a superior form of taste to everything. Right? Therefore, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami's taking 1 cup of buttermilk each day wasn't in pursuit of austerities. It wasn't in pursuit of renunciation. It was because he was absorbed in internal absorption in Sri Krishna and Radhika's Leela. Therefore, in Sad Goswami Astakam, it mentions our Sad Goswamis were always fully immersed in the wonderful pastimes and sweet pastimes of Sri Radha Krishna. Therefore, Twakvam Tonamasesha Mandalampati. Therefore, they gave up all kinds of aristocratic association and everything to do with self-interest in the material world, because they were fully internally absorbed. So bhakti has that capacity, and we just have to be steady in the practice, and also tate anukampam susumikshamano. We have to be very tolerant in the various unfolding stages to tolerate those urges. That's why Srila Rupa Goswami Pad starts off his Upadeshamrita with Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, etc. The ability to tolerate the vague, the pushes of the sit, to tolerate them, because we cannot just overnight say, no, I don't want this anymore, just make it go away, right? Because it's built on a platform of previous impressions. So those impressions are there in the Atma, in the Chitta, and therefore they will play themselves. And then not only that, but remember we talked about Praktanika, previous, and Adunik means current impressions. But those current and previous impressions are not only there as far as bhakti is concerned, but they're also there in the material energy. somebody will play a song from your high school dance or from the time you were dating your first person or something, that song will immediately bring up the remembrance of the Leelas, quote, that took place at that time in your life. So those are also impressions. When the impressions of Bhakti become very strong, they subsume and not repress, but they eradicate. This is anartha nivritti. They eradicate those material impressions, and the Bhakti impressions dominate the chitta. You understand? Then when these Bhakti impressions become very dominant, then it becomes easier and easier to control the urges and pushes that have come about from previous karmic material impressions. Right? So it is a real thing, and I know there was a time when people would, sort of just dismiss it as, well, just you have to give up illicit sex. Right? No illicit sex, no meeting, no gambling, no intoxication, boss, period, just throw it out. Right? But the reality of dealing with that was difficult for, many people. You understand? And also, we don't also want to be duplicitous. So it means we don't want to have one face in public, one face in private. So therefore, we want to try in earnest to deal with it. And that may mean incremental steps. It may mean I have to become regulated, right? I may have to deal with my spouse in a different context of exchange of energy, right? Because this will help. For those persons who are older, who've been married for many, many years and so forth, all of these things may seem easier, because if you have any seriousness about Krishna consciousness and you've been married for a significant amount of time or something, then there's ability, both husband and wife, to relate to the fact that, hey, as we're getting older, we're pursuing this goal, and therefore the giving up, we're not having children, the giving up of dealing with the sexual energy inappropriately, which is checking our bhakti, we should definitely do that, right? So that's a mutual decision that naturally may come in the accord of as you're getting older, but it may not do so if you're younger and you're married and you continually fan the flame of self-interest in relation to sexual energy, and you don't make any attempts to begin that regulating process, etc., then even as you get older, it doesn't mean that those pushes and so forth will just go away. But of course, also, it will create a dearth in your ability to practice sincerely, and having insincere practice won't yield the result of tasting the inherent qualities of rasa which are present in bhakti. So this is a case where gradually, by the influence of the bhakti rasa, right? Bhakti rasa bhavitamati, right? One verse is there. By this bhakti rasa, right, wherever it is available, kritam yadi kutopi labhyate, wherever you find that available, means that kind of harikatha, that kind of association, so forth, that encourages the taste in that bhakti rasa, you should run there immediately, right? And he says there's no price for it except the greed to have it. This is how merciful Bhagavan is. So we should try like that. We should make some determination. Listen, I will move to this stage, this time period. I will not allow the sexual energy to become dominant in my chitta and exploit. So I will put some checks and balances. No, not this, not that, not this. But don't think that your imposing checks and balances will be sufficient. You have to also say, with these checks and balances, I will replace it with unmotivated seva to Bhagavan, Hari, Guru, and Vaishnava. Because we've not realized Bhagavan at this point, perhaps, so we'll serve mostly Vaishnava. And doing that service to Vaishnava, doing service to the Harikatha Vaishnavas, right? You'll find that the potency inherent there will come and will be of great power and assistance to removing the pushes of the self-interest desires, even in relation to sexual energy. Therefore, to conclude for today, the verse that's there in the 10th canto, I believe it's 10, maybe 2833. I have to look up the number of the verse, but Vikridam Rajavalu Biridam Cha Vishnu Sharanvito Anushanu Yadvanayatya. Right? If you will hear the nature of even the highest kinds of Krishna Lila, the Ras Lila, if you will hear that with great faith from that person who is realized, who's Shraddhavan, right? So you should have faith, and the person you're hearing from should have realized faith, Paramatik Shraddha. Hearing from them, Anu means continuously, Anu also means with humility, and Anu also means Anugatya, while following their example. If you will hear from them with faith, doing these three kinds of Anu, humility, Anu means following them continuously without break, and also Anu means their example, right? So Anugatya. If you will hear with that, then it's guaranteed Ridrogam, the disease, Kam Ridrogam, of calm or lust or self-interest in the heart will very quickly be removed, and you'll become sober, right? Because it's considered that the nature of material energy makes us mada. Mada means like intoxicated, right? Like Kam, Krodh, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, right? So mada means like intoxicated. So here it says one will become dira, sober. You understand? Because this is the influence. Even also in the third verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Pi Bhatta Bhagavatam Rasayam Alayam. The word Alayam is translated as until. So Bhakti Rasa, which is fully present in the Harikatha expressed in Srimad Bhagavatam, until it is digestible by the jiva, then Alayam becomes Rasayana. Rasayana means like medicine, like tonic. That's why we have to hear Srimad Bhagavat Katha every single day. And especially hearing in the association of high-class Vaishnavas is best. Understand? Because then the potency of their own Shraddha, etc. is imbued in that Harikatha of Srimad Bhagavatam. By hearing that, the medicine of Srimad Bhagavatam takes effect on the heart. Right? And then gradually, Nasta Praisho Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevayam. By this continual save of Bhagavatam, all your Bhadrani means all your anarthas and unwanted things, they are almost practically removed. And then when Bhav comes, Sudha Sattva Visheshatma Prema Suyaksa Samyabhav. Ruchi Bis Chittamasanya. Kridaso Bhav Uchite. When Bhav will come, then that Ruchi, which we've been talking about, that taste, will completely melt away the self-interest in the form of false ego from the jiva, and then the jiva can experience their own true Swarup. Means their Seva Swarup in relation to Bhagavan, which is fully imbued with the bliss of Bhagavat Seva. Understand? So this is our aspiration, this is the goal of practicing bhakti, but we talked about micro increments, right, to achieve that. So first, developing our faith in the association of a sadhu, right? This will be prominent as a methodology to help us get to that point, right, of giving up self-interest. And self-interest in the material world is dominated because of the nature of the material world, especially at this period in Kali Yuga, is dominated by sexual energy. So we want to try to insulate our consciousness by absorption, right? Because Krishna has mentioned, if you become absorbed, then it becomes very easy to transcend if you have absorption, right? Just like by absorption in the material world, we have all of the impressions and facilities to try to enjoy material energy. It's due to absorption. There are 5 features of ignorance. One is called abhinivesh. It means forcing the jiva's absorption in material energy as opposed to Bhagavat Seva. And we're trying to break that. And the only way to break it is by, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, Sutona Samavanti Anya Gyanatva Gyanado Bhavet, coming in contact with that sadhu, guru, who has Swarup Shakti. And by their Swarup Shakti means their internal spiritual energy, they help to break the jiva's absorption in the material energy. So hopefully this is helpful. It's also a very individual consideration here. So though I'm answering the question as best I can in a generic way, it is very, very individual, because everybody's samskars are different. And therefore, you know, sometimes it used to be people would dismiss questions like that with the idea you just have to follow the principles, Prabhu, right? So, but everybody's impressions are different. So it is going to be different degrees of difficulty in following according to previous bhakti sanskars, etc. Right? But at the same time, we cannot take shelter of that. For instance, well, I don't have such high bhakti samskar, so it's hopeless for me, so I'm just going to give in. Right? No, because Krishna has also provided the methodology to increase the potency and quality of those impressions. Not quality, but quantity of those impressions. Right? That is the practice of bhakti. So if there's sincere practice, then Krishna will give a way to, even in the course of the good fight, Krishna will give the means by which to help come to that stage where, okay, I've conquered one thing, then I've conquered another thing. Then gradually, when the taste of bhakti is taking a superior position, I quoted the verse, Raso Vrajam, Raso Piyasha, Param Drisvana Vartate. Understand? Then it becomes very, very helpful. All right, my Dandavat Pranam for the couple who wrote in the question, and also my Dandavat Pranam to all the devotees here and all devotees in general. Vanchakalpatrubhyascha kripasindhuvevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.